Chapter 4. Back in my day. After hearing the news about Dong-hoon, I moved quickly. The wind whipped fiercely past my face, but I pressed on, keeping my eyes wide open. Tap. I felt the concrete crumbling beneath my legs. Tap. From rooftop to rooftop, I kicked off the walls to propel myself faster. Looking down, I saw glimmers of light flash by, the yellow lights of cars, the blue glow of smartphones, the static streetlights, the neon signs designed to allure customers, and narrow rays of light cutting through the darkness. A myriad of colors and lights illuminated the city, but I felt not a single gaze in my direction. Was it because I was in the darkness, where their lights couldn't reach, or was it simply that they had grown accustomed to heroes soaring through the sky? My mind lingering on such questions, I sped through the darkness of the night. Crumble. The asphalt beneath me cracked, probably because I landed too hard in front of the emergency room. I stomped the ground a few times in an attempt to flatten it a bit before running inside and shouting, "Dong-hoon! This is the emergency room. Please be quiet." The nurse glared at me when I rushed in and put a finger to her lips, signaling for me to be quiet. From her tone and expression, she was clearly treating me like a child. I wasn't a fan of such treatment, but it wasn't the first time I'd experienced it. Besides, it was important to keep quiet in the emergency room. I calmed my racing heart and spoke. I received a call saying that Dong-hoon was in critical condition. Do you have a guardian with you? Children aren't allowed alone into the emergency room. She tried to get me to leave by speaking kindly, not even bothering to look over the documents. I clicked my tongue before taking out my identification card and throwing it at her. The old identification card, which I hadn't needed to update because my face hadn't changed in decades, landed on the counter in front of the nurse. Haram Lee, hero registration number 01005M. Please take me to him. The nurse glanced back and forth between the ID and my face, her eyes wide in shock. I apologize, sir. After regaining her composure, she returned to her original, businesslike demeanor and continued, "What is the patient's name?" Dong-hoon Kim. Click-clack. The mechanical, monotonous clacking of her keyboard filled the dimly lit, silent hospital. "What is your relationship with the patient?" "I'm his friend." Hearing that, the nurse raised a phone to her ear to call someone. "The patient's acquaintance has arrived. What should we do?" A silence flowed between us as she patiently waited for an answer. A few long minutes later, she gave a quiet response to the individual on the other end of the phone. Yes, I understand." It hadn't been long since their conversation started, but my heart continued to burn as if it were being charred black. Each and every second the nurse took to reply was another second I spent agonizing. My fingers began to shake, and my body grew hotter, the same feeling I experienced when I fought. To cool my escalating burning emotions, I pulled out my usual small, white stick from my pocket and bit into it. Grit. Chewing on the hard metal, I managed to imprint bite marks onto it. The metal cooled my body as it touched my lips, and eventually, my trembling subsided. The nervousness and intensity controlling my body slipped away through the stick, allowing me to return to my normal self. Let's not worry. Someone like me is still alive and kicking, right? I'm sure he'll be fine as well. I've received confirmation. You may. The nurse stopped, shooting me a glare. You are not allowed to smoke in the hospital. This isn't a cigarette or anything like that. It's just something an old friend gave me because they hated seeing me smoke whenever I fought. He is currently unconscious, and I sat down in the chair by the bed and looked at my unconscious friend. He looked exactly as he had when we left the restaurant. No, there was exactly one difference, the bandage with a growing red stain. He sustained an injury to the back of his head, the doctor explained. My friend's eyes, once passionate with justice, were closed beneath the tightly wrapped bandage. We caught the culprit, but the police are interrogating them. The doctor's words meaninglessly lingered in my head. I couldn't think of anything at all. In fact, I couldn't even believe what was happening. The damage to his brain is so severe that that there is a chance of his cognitive functions ceasing. Unconscious, brain damage, crime, a hero of justice. Is money the issue? I asked. Excuse me, does he need money for surgery or something? If it's that, he's a retired hero, so I'm sure that he'd have some insurance related to. There were definitely support systems in place for retired heroes to receive help in situations like that. I was sure of it. There had to be something like that. If he had that, then, unfortunately, it is not a financial issue. Clatter. The metal stick fell from my mouth. The issue is the location of his injury. You may need to prepare for the worst. There's a chance he might not make it through the night. After we did a background check and confirmed he was a hero, we tried using healing abilities as well, but due to his severe brain injury, ha, 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 I let out a defeated laugh. The doctor lowered his voice. Normally, we only allow visitation until 10 p.m., but since you're a hero, I understood he was allowing me to stay a bit longer. After that, the doctor quietly left the room and gave me some alone time with my friend. I picked my metal stick up from the floor, gripped it tightly, and perched on the edge of Dong Hoon's bed. Dong Hoon, do you remember the first time we met? Beep. The machine keeping track of his vitals continued to cry out. They called us awakeners and gathered us in one place to manage us. Phew. His slow breaths were all I received in reply. I began to talk about the origins of those who became known as heroes, our beginning. We were forced to wear ankle monitors and endure all sorts of humiliation, remember? Still, we fought. We fought for justice. We fought for humanity. Creak. The bed frame creaked slightly as I moved. I don't know if everyone was like that or if they only selected those with hearts of justice, but in the end, we protected it all, yeah? I opened the window. Did you know? Heroes these days aren't slandered like we were. In fact, they don't even get ambushed anymore. So they feel free to show off their real names and faces on TV. Back in our day, people aren't afraid of the evacuation sirens anymore. They're all calm and quiet, like they know that the heroes will protect them while they evacuate to the shelters. The brilliant lights of the city cascaded together onto the bed. Dong Hoon, isn't this what you wanted to see? You told me that you'd create a world where people could laugh again. We made that world. Why the hell are you trying to die without even getting a good look at it? I recalled the last question he asked me outside of the restaurant. Had we truly done all that we could? We did, you idiot. The peace we enjoyed was something we created. Sure, there were a few wrinkles, but everyone could smile. A regret began to linger in my heart. Regret that I couldn't provide him with a proper answer when he was doubting himself. Don't die. I can tell you this as many times as you need to hear it. I looked at his face and watched in silence, believing that another miracle would happen. We are heroes, people who always shone. Always. Dong-hoon Kim, male, 46 years old. Homicide. Received an injury to the occipital region. Brain death. 124. Dressed in black, I absent-mindedly stared at his photo. He looked as if he had all the happiness in the world. It was the last photo he had taken, captured over 15 years prior, before he had separated from society and stopped taking photos. His youthful smile crossed time and lingered in my eyes. Dazed, I continued to stare at the photo while sitting on the ground. Who's she? His daughter. Crimson Hammer, he's a magical girl. It seems like they were pretty close. Such conversations repeated around me. Since Dong-hoon had no family, I chose to become the chief mourner, though it was in name only. I didn't do anything in particular. The ceremony was held in a large funeral hall. Countless people from all walks of life visited to express their condolences. I simply watched them. The association's employees received all of the mourners and did everything for me. The photos, the coffin, the funeral hall, the grave, etc. They tried to ask me a few questions at first, but after I only responded with despondent nods, they left me alone. All I had to do was remain seated in front of the casket. There was no need for me to shake hands with politicians for photos or have conversations with the higher-ups of the association. The weight of humanity does not rest on your shoulders alone. I looked around after hearing Dong-hoon's voice and saw his face on a TV. Scenes from his speech quietly played on the TVs installed around the funeral hall. The speech repeated itself over and over again as I continued to watch, enraptured. Following the speech was an overview of the case, details on the criminal who'd been interrogated, their personal information, and their location. I left the funeral hall. Slam! The detention center's walls collapsed, and white concrete dust scattered to the wind. It was right in front of me, the bastard that had killed Dong-hoon. Was it you? My emotions started to explode, pouring out despite my efforts to restrain them. Why? Why did you kill him? It looked at me, almost as if it wasn't afraid that I had just charged into a government building. It stared at me boldly. Because he was an awakener. It was a simple sentence uttered in a raspy, split voice. It was just because of that? I grabbed its collar, lifting it off the ground. I'd believed hero discrimination to have vanished. We'd worked so hard to eradicate it, after all. The trash in front of me choked as if it couldn't breathe, yet it still gave bold responses. It was. Awakeners are at the forefront of evil, and this is a holy war to defeat them. Its excited, cheerful voice seemed to take joy in the situation, as if it were nothing. What? The government. Those bastards are also awakeners. This is all because of the disruptive electromagnetic waves. What the hell is this? Officers, let me ask you a question. I spoke to the police officers surrounding me. I had broken into a government building, after all. Their faces stiff, the officers didn't respond. It didn't matter. Is this thing insane? They nodded in response. A mental illness, a civilian, and individual heroes couldn't exact justice upon. A person I couldn't do anything about. The entire incident was simply the cause of someone with a mental illness. My sense of justice as a hero and the association's ruling had determined as much. Thud. I dropped it back onto the floor. See, my powers have stopped. The lunatic continued to shout and roar. Myself and those like me couldn't do anything. We were heroes, and that was the system we created. Dong-hoon became a sensation. They talked about the final moments of a hero and about his life. His story continued to be broadcast on television, and debates about the heinous crimes in society leading to his death raged. Of course, his face was plastered all over the front pages. There were also countless letters of support for him online. Apparently, the association had been working hard behind the scenes to create such a result. They were using the story of a hero's tragedy to boost the social standing of other heroes. Almost as if they were intentionally trying to take the credit for it, there was an abundance of sensationalized misinformation about him in the media. Ordinary civilians might not have noticed it, but there were clear errors that heroes who had shared their stories with him could spot immediately. Still, none of the old heroes, including myself, said a word. It would help create a better future for heroes, after all. The funeral service passed amidst that despair. There was no revenge that could only be appeased by blood, nor was there a violent incident of reprisal. Time simply passed by. I was unable to do anything as the dying embers within my heart faded once more after a brief but brilliant flash. A platform had been set up next to the grave, and the rain continued to cascade around us. On the platform, someone I'd never seen before poured their heart out for Dong-hoon. He was a fantastic hero. He fought endlessly for humanity. Even in retirement, he used his life in our service. Are you allowed to be so fiery during a eulogy? What was the close on such a hero's story? He met his fate in a dark, cold alley. Yeah, it was a ridiculous way to die. I still couldn't believe that he was ambushed by someone with a mental illness. It is now time to turn our attention to the retired heroes. I am not just talking about the hero being buried today. If we look around us, we see countless heroes battered by the hardships of life. The eulogy quickly shifted into a blatantly political speech. They argued that, because a hero had died like that, we needed better opportunities for them. Annoyed, I tuned the speaker out. After the eulogy, the burial service continued. More accurately, Dong-hoon's final resting place. A casket made of expensive wood topped with pure white cloth was lowered into a rectangular hole in the ground. Dirt fell upon the cloth, and the casket was slowly obscured by the earth. Eventually, a mound of earth formed over the buried casket, accompanied by a pristine white border and a tombstone. People gathered there, shared their stories, and slowly dispersed, one by one. Surely, the rain was uncomfortable. The television networks left shortly afterward. In the dwindling crowd, someone approached me. "Will you still be staying, Crimson Hammer? It's my friend's final journey. It caused his death." "Is that so?" The man slowly removed his fedora and gave a respectful bow to the grave. "I dislike such proceedings. It's like they view heroes as clowns." People continued to leave around us until only the man and I were left to silently watch the grave. Finally, the man put his fedora back in place before leaving me. Standing alone in the cemetery, I sat and leaned back against the cold gravestone of my friend. "It's over, Dong-hoon." I looked up into the sky as the cascade continued to pour down on me, casting a dark shadow over the day. "You really are dead." Only then did I truly feel the weight of Dong-hoon's passing. Dong-hoon, the friend I had killed. The association is really pushing it, too. I can't believe they so openly used your death as a platform for their politics. Continuing to grumble to myself, I recalled what the fedora-wearing man had said. Clowns? A flood of other thoughts followed the word, the living profiting from the names of the deceased, the association's politics, heroes uninterested in justice, clowns dancing on television, regulations seeking only safety, and the society that allowed all of it to run rampant. As if a switch had been flipped in my head, I came to a realization. The heroes have all disappeared, and the only ones left are nothing but clowns. Even the silent old heroes had been forced into the role. Similarly, I was at fault for my silence and allowing society to progress to that point. I had merely believed that, as long as heroes could smile, everything would be okay. I was at fault for walking instead of running. By my own hands, my own inaction, heroes had vanished from the world. My wish for them to avoid the suffering we had endured ended up being their downfall. Heroes had been corrupted by the world, and the last true hero had just been laid to rest. Clowns were all that remained. That being the case, someone had to instill a proper sense of justice in them. Justice could not die in such a way. I picked up my drenched body and walked away from my friend's grave. A new fire had ignited within me. I would use my body and my fury as kindling to set the world ablaze. My flames would correct me and guide me from the wrong path I'd taken. They would illuminate the path for me, a sinner. I would bring hardship to those who weren't true heroes. So that false heroes couldn't tarnish their name, I would bring suffering. I saw a crowbar lying on the ground, likely left behind by the workers who had dug the grave. As I left the cemetery, I tightly gripped the crowbar. I could not swing my hammer. That was a weapon reserved for the magical girl who cherished justice. There was no need for a weapon like that in the mire I would be dragging them into. It was time for me to teach them. Back in my day, the feeling of blood dripping down your skin, the fear of the other world, and the gore spilled because of it, the feeling of being blamed and scorned by the very people you were saving, of rotten tomatoes being thrown at your head, how it felt for your comrades to die, a golden hammer, the feel of the endless rain, alleyways filled with vomit, how it felt for the police to beat you with their batons, the death of a friend, and a crimson crowbar. What the hell? They weren't that different at all.